This is The Listening Tube.
Hello, and thanks for listening to the first episode of Season 2 of The Listening Tube. I'm your host, Bob Woodley. In this episode, a pledge of allegiance just for white people. Forgive me for not capitalizing white. It's volcano season in North America, and not just because progressive heads are exploding. Plus, I'll speak with two men who went on a mission to help orphans in Ukraine. But first...
Not the headlines!
Well, if women don't have it bad enough already, dealing with the current upheaval of the abortion laws, earning less than men for doing the same work, or more work, the pain of childbirth, transvestites taking your trophies, and having to put up with men in general, now it turns out that women wait longer for care in emergency rooms than men. It doesn't say who wrote the article I read, but the first thing they say is, "This is pretty scary." So they present you with their opinion before they present you with any facts. That seems to be the way journalism is today. But is it really scary? Let's take a look at the numbers in the story that compare the male-female response times. The study cited by research done at Northwestern University says the average time difference between men and women being evaluated and treated is 12 minutes. Women wait 12 minutes longer than men. They also break it down another way, by how long it takes to be triaged, which means being evaluated and prioritized. So you're not treated, just prioritized for treatment. It takes women 3 minutes longer than men to get to this point of care. So the difference between men and women getting treatment is 12 minutes, and the difference between men and women getting prioritized is 3 minutes. The study quotes a researcher as saying, "These findings suggest potential gaps of care that may be excellent targets for quality improvement." And it might. Or it might suggest that because men are so bullheaded that we often wait until the very last moment of our lives to admit there might be something wrong with us. And by the time we do, we have to be rushed to the emergency room. Emergency room personnel are trained to evaluate and move quickly when people are brought in. They don't care about a person's gender. To suggest it is an insult to emergency room personnel everywhere. What I find interesting is that although the difference between men and women getting treated is mere minutes, the actual average time it takes to get evaluated and treated is 2 hours 52 minutes for men and 3 hours 4 minutes for women. Both men and women wait almost an hour to get triaged. If there's an amount of time we should be worried about, it's not the minutes between men and women, it's the hours it takes to get treated. But that's not nearly as bad as what can happen once you get treated. A New York woman says her sister, who has a rare disease, is struggling to find the right people to help her. She ended up at a clinic that did a variety of tests, including blood work, a vision test, and a health risk assessment. During her appointment, she got emotional because she feels frustrated and helpless. She cried a little. When she got the bill, there was a charge for it. Yes, the clinic charged her $40 for crying. It was listed on the invoice as a brief emotional behavior assessment. This is a big problem with our healthcare system. I went through an episode a couple years ago when I lost the hearing in my right ear. I was referred to specialists who did tests and started treatment, and it all happened very quickly, but to no avail. I don't ever expect to get the hearing in my right ear back. But when I got the medical bills from the hospital, they charged me for every person I saw on each appointment. So if 2 people attended to me, I got charged for each of them. They wanted me to take a hearing test every time I walked in the door, and I got charged for each one, even though the results were as anticipated, the same as last time. Then, after the hearing test, they'd send me on to somebody else to figure out what to do with me. Then they'd do whatever they thought was best and charge me for it. Then, just to be sure they covered all their bases, they had me get an MRI and then charged me $4,000 for it, while the average cost of an MRI is $1,200. Honestly, I'm glad the janitor didn't come into the room to empty the trash can while I was there, or I would have probably been charged for that too.
Let's go back through the listening tube.
This week in 1652, Rhode Island passes the first law in North America making slavery illegal. That's right, America's smallest state was the first to stand up and say slavery is wrong. That's part of what makes America great. America is a place where you can work to undo what is unjust. America is supposed to be a place where you're free to express yourself and shine light on issues that may need attention. You might not get results right away. It might take a long time to change minds. But sooner or later, as we like to think, justice will prevail. In 1780 this week came New England's dark day. A combination of thick smoke and heavy cloud cover causes complete darkness in eastern Canada and New England at 10:30 in the morning. Imagine if that happened today. This week in 1848, the Mexican-American War, Mexico ratifies the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, thus ending the war and ceding California, Nevada, Utah, and parts of 4 other modern-day U.S. states to the United States for $15 million. Perhaps Vladimir Putin will get part of Ukraine for money and an end to the war. This week in 1863, Rosalia de Castro publishes Cantares Gallegos, the first book in the Galician language. Okay, wait a minute. Why in the world would you publish a book in a new language? I believe I already talked about the man who told me he invented his own language and every word started with the letter N. If language is used to communicate, why use a language nobody else understands? This week in 1864, Russia declares an end to the Russian-Circassian War, and many Circassians are forced into exile. The day is designated the Circassian Day of Mourning. Today, it's Russian territory, northeast of the Black Sea, just east of Crimea, which Russia reclaimed in 2014 as a prelude to the invasion of Ukraine this year. This week in 1872, during Reconstruction, U.S. President Ulysses S. Grant signs the Amnesty Act of 1872 into law, restoring full civil rights to all but about 500 Confederate sympathizers. They got all their civil rights back, but had to take an oath that they no longer believed in slavery. The act says that every such person shall take and subscribe the following oath or affirmation, and thenceforward keep and maintain said oath inviolate, and which oath shall be registered for permanent preservation, and shall be of the tenor and effect following, to wit. This is the White Pledge of Allegiance to which I referred in the opening. I, your name here, do solemnly swear or affirm, in presence of Almighty God, that I will henceforth faithfully support, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Union of the States thereunder, and that I will, in like manner, abide by and faithfully support all laws and proclamations which have been made during the existing rebellion with reference to the emancipation of slaves. So help me God. This week in 1896, the United States Supreme Court rules in Plessy versus Ferguson that the separate but equal doctrine is constitutional. This is something I might like to explore further. This week in 1906, the Wright brothers are granted U.S. patent number 821,393 for their flying machine. This week in 1915, Lassen Peak in California erupts with a powerful force and is the only mountain other than Mount St. Helens to erupt in the continental United States during the 20th century. Which, by the way, also happened this week, but in 1980. Mount St. Helens eruption killed 57 people and caused $3 billion in damage. So stay away from volcanoes this week. This week in 1921, the U.S. Congress passes the Emergency Quota Act, establishing national quotas on immigration. Perhaps our current administration should refer back to that 1921 law for some guidance. In 1927, the Bath school disaster. 45 people are killed by bombs planted by a disgruntled school board member in Michigan. And in 1934, Oskaloosa, Iowa becomes the first municipality in the United States to fingerprint all of its citizens. That was probably also the last municipality in the United States to fingerprint all of its citizens. This week in 1940, the first prisoners arrive at a new concentration camp at Auschwitz. And in 1944, deportation of Crimean Tatars by the Soviet Union government begins. This week in 1954, the United States Supreme Court hands down a unanimous decision in Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas. And in 1962, a birthday salute to U.S. President John F. Kennedy takes place at Madison Square Garden. The highlight is Marilyn Monroe's rendition of Happy Birthday. This week in 1964, U.S. President Lyndon B. Johnson announces the goals of his Great Society social reforms to bring an end to poverty and racial injustice in America. President Johnson's intentions were good, but the results are questionable. Welfare programs have become overused and abused. People have become dependent on the government, and some government programs promote that dependency rather than discouraging it. And this week in 1973, televised hearings begin in the United States Senate over the Watergate scandal. In 1983, the U.S. Department of Energy declassifies documents showing the world's largest mercury pollution event in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, ultimately found to be 4.2 million pounds in response to the Appalachian Observer's Freedom of Information Act request. Today, the Oak Ridge National Laboratory is leading the way in detecting and eliminating mercury and understanding how it spreads. In 1989, the Chinese authorities declare martial law in the face of pro-democracy demonstrations, setting the scene for the Tiananmen Square massacre. This week in 1990, the General Assembly of the World Health Organization eliminates homosexuality from the list of psychiatric diseases. That's right. Homosexuality was considered a psychiatric disease by the World Health Organization until 1990. And in 1996, the Supreme Court of the United States rules in Romer versus Evans against a law that would have prevented any city, town, or county in the state of Colorado from taking any legislative, executive, or judicial action to protect the rights of gays and lesbians. This week in 1998 in Miami, Florida, 5 abortion clinics are hit by a butyric acid attacker. And in 2007, trains from North and South Korea crossed the 38th parallel in a test run agreed by both governments. This is the first time that trains have crossed the demilitarized zone since 1953. Now, North Korea's leader is more interested in building rockets and starving his people.
Contact the Listening Tube by calling 570-601-1101 or by email thelisteningtube@outlook.com.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine has certainly grabbed the attention of the rest of the world, and people all over are taking steps to aid the refugees taking shelter in other countries, as well as those who have stayed behind. One of those efforts began in a small Pennsylvania town called Shamokin. Two men there, businessman and former county commissioner Vinny Clausy and Reverend Mykola Ivanov, pastor of Transfiguration of Our Lord Ukrainian Church in Shamokin, took it upon themselves to raise money and personally go to the Polish border with Ukraine to help the most vulnerable in the area, orphans. Reverend Ivanov is also a native of Lviv, Ukraine. I had the pleasure of speaking to both men about the project and what was accomplished. The mission began with a fundraiser organized by Mr. Clausy, who donated $10,000 of his own money to kickstart the project. Reverend Ivanov explains how the idea began.
Vinny Clausy approached me and he said to me, Father, I want to help. And I said, okay, so what do you want to do? You know what, let's try to raise money. The goal is going to be like $100,000 in 2 weeks. At first, I was skeptical because, raising $100,000 in 2 weeks, how it looks like really ambitious plans,
Well, that was an ambitious plan. Some of the best plans start with that kind of ambition.
Yeah.
How much money did you ultimately raise?
$140,000.
$140,000.
Yes. So I was hoping, at that time when we started to do this, I was hoping to raise at least like 30, 40, 50,000. Like it would be still okay to help those kids.
Originally, the money would be donated to an organization like the Red Cross to distribute the money.
We were thinking this way at the beginning, but then we thought to ourselves, you know what? Since we are physically going to the border, why not to change it into the mission that we physically will be delivering the things for those kids ourselves?
So while the Reverend stayed in Poland to procure all the supplies they would need, Mr. Clausy delivered the goods to the people in Ukraine who needed it.
And he was handing the money, not the money, but the things that we were buying those kids personally. So my mission was to do, I had a list of the kids, their needs. Like, for example, we were helping one of the orphanages was orphans with the special needs kids. And those special needs kids, they have different kind of meds that they take daily. So I had a list of the kids. I had the exactly names of the meds that they're using, that they're taking daily. I had the size of their shoes, whatever they need, like today, as of today. And that was really like a totally different approach as everyone else is doing.
Here's Mr. Clausy.
And go to the Ukraine and myself and deliver whatever we had to deliver to the orphanage. Because I did not want anyone to profit that money, any organization whatsoever. And that's how I did it. And I went to the Ukraine and I did what I committed to the public. To deliver the money and buy shoes, buy laptop, and buy tablets, and buy food, and deliver to the orphanage.
Reverend Ivanov says assessing those needs was the first mission.
So we got to our hotel, we dropped our things, and right after we dropped our things at our hotel room, we went to see the refugees in in Rzeszów. Those families, mothers with kids. I was able to locate the buildings that they stay in, and we went there to see exactly what kind of needs do they have there, those refugees. So when we arrived at those buildings with the refugees, we have realized that they need food, and the fastest way that day when we arrived to provide anything for them, we were able to give them some cash. Each family got 500 zloty. It was like around $120 in US dollars,
So it was Polish currency.
Yes, we had what we did before our departure to Poland. We have exchanged all the money into the Polish money currency here in the United States.
And you traveled with $140,000 worth of Polish currency.
Yes.
On you.
Yes.
Were you worried or nervous about that at all?
Why? We were flying to Poland. It's NATO. It's civilized world. It's not somewhere in the middle of nowhere. It's something that I've been a few times in Poland, and I do know. And Polish people are nice people. They are not barbarians or something, you know what I'm saying?
Having received special permission to fly to Poland with $140,000 in Polish currency, the team finds the needs of refugees and orphans were quite different.
With the refugees, it's a different story. With the orphanage, it's a different story. So refugees, a lot of them were there just for the time being. So a lot of them were traveling through Rzeszów, and they were just stopping by in those buildings that Ukrainian Catholic Church, Ukrainian Catholic Church in Rzeszów, had this bright idea to rent some buildings like in Rzeszów and be able to provide this kind of little middle stop for those refugees and help them with meal, with the night that they can sleep with their kids, and then they were going further into Europe or something, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So that was some of them stayed there all the time, some of them just came for a few days, but with the refugees, it's a different story. Refugees, they needed food and money to travel. With the orphanages in Ukraine, they needed food, and our mission also was to help them to continue education. So what we did for all those kids, we were buying tablets, those special tablets that we are using here in the United States sometimes. We are using here like Chromebooks. And in Ukraine, they can use the tablets that they can continue their education.
So what was most needed by the people you were there to help?
On food.
Food.
Yes. We also been buying like shoes, brand new shoes for those orphans. And these kids, you have to see their faces and eyes, and the kids who were moved actually from east into west of Ukraine sometimes during the night and during the airstrikes, you know what I'm saying? And you have to understand that these kids, when you were entering the room, they were so scared of someone that they don't know, that these kids were starting screaming out of that they don't know the person that enters the room. That's how scary it is. So we had one of the orphanage were under 2 years old kids, and you can imagine you have no father, no mother, and they were taking them as a shoving them into the buses like little puppies, because there was no time to explain those kids where are we going, why we are going. And they were moved during the night. So with us, it was really tough because we couldn't disclose any locations of the kids because of the war, you know. It was all done in secret, and I was promising those people who helped me on the Ukrainian side that I will not disclose any of the locations of the kids.
Vinny Clausey says the kids would warm up to him once they realized he was there to help.
The first time I seen an orphanage, it was we arrived there Sunday at noon, and Sunday night we went to see one of the orphanage, and it was all little kids. And I mean, in the beginning they was a little nervous, and then I started hugging them and get friendly with them, and I started giving money to them kids, and like $125 each children I give, and they got real close. They got real friendly. I mean, you got to seek to believe. Them children, they don't have nobody. The mother died in the war. The father died in the war. They don't have no parents whatsoever.
Wow, and approximately how many are there? I mean, you probably only...
It was a different orphanage, a different size. Like, there was some like 6 people the first time we seen. There was some 20 people, some 50 people, some 25 people, and their kids. I'm talking about kids. There was all different size. In Ukraine, when I went to Ukraine, and the first one I see, there was an orphanage of like mentally challenged kids, and I bought a TV for them. I bought a washing machine. I bought everything I could to make their life better for the people who was watching the children. Then I went to a different orphanage, and it was 50 kids, and I give it 50 tablets, 50 shoes, and we buy food, and that's how it started. We went to one, to another one, till we run out of money.
And orphans weren't the only beneficiaries of the mission.
20,000 American money. We bought a truckload of food. We sent it to the war zone, where their house got knocked down for the Russians, and they didn't have nothing. They didn't have no food, nothing. We sent food to the adults too.
Reverend Ivanov tells me they had help once they got there. 4 people on the Polish side of the border, and 10 people helping Mr. Clausey on the Ukrainian side. Having brought Polish currency, everything they bought was bought in Poland, and being a stranger in a new place made the logistics a challenge.
It was like 2 cell phones on each ear 24/7, and I was going to sleep at 4 a.m., at 7 a.m., just to be able to feel logistics. This is the most difficult. When you come into different city, you don't know anyone. You don't know where to go, what to do, how to order, how to get the transportation, how to do this, and that. Until you learn a lot, you spend a lot of time.
Then, once the supplies were secured, getting them over the border into Ukraine was also a challenge.
Like me, I was literally sometimes just scratching my head thinking that I will pull my hair out because it was so intense. It was so difficult to do the logistics. And plus, that you would understand, the Polish transportation, they not always are willing to go into Ukraine because, as you know, the weapon that is provided right now by United States and NATO for Ukrainians, they've been transported by the little trucks or big trucks, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So for Russians, each and every truck that enters Ukraine from Poland, so from the Polish side, might be the target.
I see.
Because they think those trucks, they bring weapon. So for the Polish guy to go into Ukraine, first of all, you have to pay enormous price for the insurance of the truck and insurance of the driver. And secondly, not that many Polish drivers want to go into Ukraine. So my biggest concern was to find Ukrainian truck and Ukrainian driver that, for example, got stuck in Poland, somewhere in Poland, and he is waiting for his delivery or his load of whatever he was supposed to bring back to Ukraine. And, for example, he has 2 days time, you know, and he has nothing to do those 2 days. He just waits for his shipment, you know. So that was my biggest thing, to find those drivers and those trucks that they can help me while they are still in Poland waiting for their things to arrive.
Certainly, a mission like this, supporting the most vulnerable people in your home country that is currently under attack by another nation, can take a toll on you.
You never forget the eyes and all the kids. When they were saying, stay with us, don't go back to the United States, stay with us. That was the toughest part of this mission. That you come home a different person. You come home with totally looking differently at all the fundraisers that we are doing here in the United States. You look at these things later on differently, because you do understand then that with $140,000 that we have been able to raise, we helped like 7 orphanages, providing them food, shoes, tablets for the education, everything else. And you do understand later on how much you could do if you would have the money that we sometimes raising through the government or something, like, you know what I'm saying.
Mr. Clausey, too, says he's been changed by the trip.
Well, it's something I like. You guys have got to understand that what I see and the picture I take, that was the real thing. That was the real stuff. I mean, this is not something you see on ABC News or Fox News. It is the real thing. And it changed my life. It changed my life 100%, because I'm never going to forget them kids. I'm sorry I get emotional.
The mission was a success, and the Reverend wants to let everyone who helped in any way know that they're appreciated.
Thanks for all your prayers and all the good deeds that you're doing in your life, because we can make a change, okay? We can make a change by doing the right thing in our life, and that would be the biggest change.
And change lives they did. Not only by providing material goods to people who needed them, but they also changed attitudes of vulnerable kids who were afraid of strangers and now know that there are good people in the world. There is another mission being planned. If you'd like to help, email the Listening Tube at outlook.com and I'll give you the contact information. The Listening Tube is written and produced by yours truly. Copyright 2022. Thank you for being a part of the Listening Tube. I'm your host, Bob Woodley, for Thou ad infinitum.